Hi, in this video I'll demonstrate how to change the front brake pads on the Mazda 3. This happens to be a 2004 1.6 Sport Dynamic. Chock the wheel so the car can't roll. Put the handbrake up, loosen the wheel nuts, jack up the car. Right, remove the wheel. Right, open the brake reservoir so that it can allow for back pressure. Right, before working on the brakes, it's a good idea to take a hose pipe and just remove any of the brake dust. Right, remove the retaining clip. Now what you need to do is you need to separate these pads. So you can use screwdrivers, but make sure you do not gouge the disc at all. Right, so what you need to do is you need to separate these pads. You need to depress that piston. There's a piston. Now you don't want to push anything there, you'll puncture through the rubber. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to separate the pad from the disc. Do not scratch the disc. So all I do is I gently push my screwdriver in there and I'm wedging it as I go. And I'm just being very gentle, and if anything I'm only pressing on the edge of the disc. And I gently pull towards me to separate the pad from the disc and also to push that piston back in. Apply an even force and gradually that piston will go in. Remember that I've opened the brake reservoir tank. Right, as you can see the piston is now depressed. Now it's time to take off the caliper bolts. Right, the caliper bolts are a size 17. There's one on top and one underneath. Make sure you've got a place to rest this, because if you take off these caliper bolts, the caliper is going to hang freely and it's going to tug on this brake line. Once you've taken this off, do not twist it like this, you'll damage the brake line. Right, you can now remove your brake pads. You'll notice there's a clip at the back which is holding it in place. If you want to, you can disassemble this by just pulling that off, and I'll show you what to do with this now. I've got some thinners here and I'm just going to clean this and inspect the condition. Right, I can see there's some minor imperfections here, and all I'm doing is I'm taking some 600 grit sandpaper and I'm just basically polishing it. This is a very fine sandpaper. Right, now you can see how much better that is. Now some brake pads come with a lubricant. Personally, I prefer to keep it dry. Just be careful of putting grease or anything on here, because it can have a chemical reaction with the rubber that sits over here and it can actually swell and seize it. Personally, I leave this dry. Right, now I just inspect those rubber sleeves and now I can put this back in. Check that this can move freely, which it can. You could clean this if you wanted to, and now I can put my brake pads in. Right, to put your brake pad in, just make sure it's slotted in there and there, otherwise it'll block you from pressing in. Now you can press it into the piston. Right, put your other brake pad in here. And now put this back on your disc. It is a good time to measure the thickness of your disc just in case your disc needs replacement. Just make sure you're twisting this back correctly. As you can see, I can follow the lines, they're now straight. If these lines were twirled, then I know that I've twisted this the wrong way around. If you cannot get on the disc, it means that you have not opened this wide enough, you have not depressed that piston wide enough. So now what you can do is just depress it again. Right, put some blue Loctite on the bolts. I've already put a drop there and some there. Right, using a torque wrench, tighten the caliper bolts. Tighten to about 110 Newton meters. Right, it's time to put the brake retaining clip back on. All I do is I put that in there and I do the one side. As you can see, one side is now done. Now all I do is I put my finger there, I'm holding it in the hole just at the entry point there, and then I bend this with my finger like that. As you can see, I put it over this platform, and all I do is I take a pair of pliers and I gently tap it in. Make sure both sides are tapped in. On your brake disc, you'll see a minimum thickness notice, either here or here. What you need to do is take a vernier and measure the thickness of your disc. If your disc is less than the minimum thickness, it's time to change the disc. Just keep in mind that the disc surface should be flat. There should be no deep scratches or imperfections on the disc. It should be smooth. If I feel with my finger and I go from top to bottom, it is smooth. It should not be wavy at all. Sometimes there's a lip around the side. It doesn't mean that the disc is completely worn. It does mean that it is time to monitor it because you're getting close to the minimum thickness. Right, all you need to do is put your wheel back on, close the brake reservoir filler cap, and just for the first 100 kilometers do light braking. Let the pad and the disc mate with each other. Don't do heavy braking. Right, I like to put a bit of copper compound on the hub because sometimes the wheel, I like to put a little, right, I've put a bit of copper compound over here and on the surface here. What this does, it stops it from seizing. Sometimes the wheel and the hub mate together and there's a bit of rust here and you can't get the wheel off, especially if you're on the side of the road and you're changing a tire. So I've just put a little bit here, but do not put on the threads.